The laughter came before I even saw them. It floated out from the kitchen's sharp, familiar, the kind of laughter that slices instead of soothes. My mother's voice rang the loudest. Can you believe she still calls it a job, making silly videos online while real people work? My father chuckled. That girl's 30 and still chasing fairy dust. At least Amanda married someone with a 401k. Then came my uncle's booming laugh, followed by the scrape of forks and the hum of the football game on TV. I froze in the hallway holding the pumpkin pie I'd baked that morning, the one Mom had asked for if you have time. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon hit me like nostalgia and nausea at once. I stood there long enough to hear my mother say, "Maybe she'll grow out of this YouTube phase when the rent's due." They laughed again. I smiled tight, practiced the kind of smile that hides a bruise, and walked into the dining room as if nothing happened. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. The laughter died instantly. Mom looked up first, her red lipstick curving into surprise. "Oh, Emily, we didn't hear you come in." My father cleared his throat. "We were just talking about your channel." He couldn't even say it without hesitation, like the word was too unserious to exist in his mouth. I set the pie on the table, careful not to slam it. "Yeah, I heard," I said lightly. "Don't worry, I'm still filming silly videos. Someone's got to keep the internet entertained." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Then my sister Amanda jumped in with a chirpy, "Oh, come on, Em, you know they just worry." "It's hard for them to understand the whole influencer thing." She said influencer like it was a punchline. I just smiled again, picked up a plate, and started carving the turkey no one had offered me. Dinner moved on, but every clink of a fork felt like an echo of that hallway moment. Between bites, Mom asked if I'd found a real sponsor yet, or if I was still hoping for internet fame. I told her I was working on something new, that my channel was growing. She nodded with the kind of politeness you reserve for a child's drawing. "Well," she said, pouring more wine, "I'm sure you'll find something stable soon." Dad added, "It's good, you're a creative sweetheart, but you can't live off likes forever." The table chuckled again. My chest burned. I wanted to tell them about the brand emails waiting in my inbox, the script I'd stayed up writing till 4 a.m., the 10,000 subscribers who left comments like, "You changed how I see myself," but I didn't. I cut another slice of turkey instead and said, "You're probably right, Dad. Guess I'll start applying at Walmart next week." That earned a few nervous laughs. Amanda's husband muttered, "At least you'd get a discount." I took a sip of cold wine and let the sting settle. The truth was, I'd learned long ago how to weaponize silence. Let them think I was harmless. Let them think I was failing. I'd rather be underestimated than pitied. After dinner, I helped clear the table while the others migrated to the living room. Football pie, more laughter. I washed dishes with scalding water, staring out the kitchen window at the bare oak tree in the yard. The same tree I used to climb as a kid, back when I thought my parents were heroes. I could hear snippets of conversation drifting in from the other room, Amanda talking about her husband's promotion, Mom bragging about the family business. I wasn't part of that plural anymore. My life had turned into the family's cautionary tale. "Emily, honey," Mom called. "Bring the pie in, will you?" I dried my hands and walked in with the dessert plate, past the photos on the wall. Amanda's wedding, Dad's golf trophy, my college graduation picture hung crooked and half-faded. The smell of coffee filled the air as I set the pie down. Mom handed me a knife, smiling too sweetly. "We were just telling your uncle about your videos." "What do you call it again?" "A lifestyle vlog," I nodded. "Something like that." "Well," she continued, I told him, "you're still figuring it out. These things take time, right?" Amanda's husband laughed. "Hey, maybe she'll make a video about us next Thanksgiving." The room joined in. I forced a laugh, cutting a perfect slice of pie and handed it to him. "Careful," I said. "You might not like your screen time." That shut him up. As the night dragged on, the house felt smaller. Every conversation circled back to work, money, marriage. I sat quietly, smiling when appropriate, nodding when necessary. It was almost impressive how easily they could belittle something they'd never seen. To them, YouTube was a playground. To me, it was a lifeline. They didn't know the hours of editing until my eyes blurred the nights I skipped dinner to pay rent, the comments from strangers saying my videos made them feel less alone. None of that mattered at this table. Here I was still the one who hadn't grown up. When it was finally time to leave, Mom walked me to the door. "You know, sweetheart," she said, "you're talented. You just need direction." I smiled. "Maybe I already have one," she sighed. "I just want you to be happy." "I am," I said, and meant it. Not because of them, but in spite of them. The air outside was cold and sharp. I pulled my coat tighter and stepped into the driveway. Through the window, I could see them laughing again, their silhouettes flickering under the warm kitchen light. My breath fogged the glass of my car as I whispered, "They'll see soon enough." When I got home, the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of my computer. My tiny one-bedroom smelled faintly of coffee and effort. I turned on the ring light, its glow filling the room with that familiar, soft white warmth. On the desk lay my camera, my notes, and a half-empty mug. I sat down, hit record, and looked into the lens. "Hey guys," I began softly. "I hope your Thanksgiving was kind." I paused, choosing my words. Mine was educational. A small smile tugged at my lips. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you don't believe in your dreams because they've forgotten their own. So, this one's for anyone who's ever been laughed at for trying. I took a breath and continued, my voice steady. You don't need them to understand. You just need to keep going. Because one day the same people who doubted you will say they always knew you'd make it. When I hit stop, the screen froze on my face, calm, tired, defiant. I uploaded the video, scheduled it for the morning, and sat back. The city outside was quiet, lights twinkling through the fog. Somewhere, my family was probably finishing dessert, maybe mentioning my name again with that same mocking amusement. I smiled to myself. Let them laugh, I whispered. They'll have their reasons to stop soon. Before turning off the light, I looked around my small studio, the tangled wires, the cheap microphone, the notebook filled with ideas no one had heard yet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And somewhere deep down beneath the hurt and the silence, I could feel it, the slow, steady pulse of something coming alive. The first Monday after Thanksgiving felt heavier than usual, like the air itself carried leftover judgment. I woke up to the gray light leaking through the blinds and the faint hum of traffic outside my apartment. My phone buzzed notifications from the new video I'd posted the night before. I blinked at the screen. 2,000 views overnight, dozens of comments. One of them read, "You made me cry." My mom said the same thing to me. I smiled weakly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The ache from that dinner still sat somewhere behind my ribs, but the words on my phone dulled it a little. I brewed a pot of coffee and opened my laptop. The thumbnail of my new video glowed for anyone who's been laughed at. My voice sounded calmer than I remembered when I played it back. There was no anger, just a quiet steadiness I hadn't known I was capable of. The view count kept ticking upward. 2.3 kelvins, 2.8 kelvins, 3.4 kelvins. It wasn't viral by any stretch, but it was mine. I clicked into the comments again, scrolling past usernames I didn't know but somehow felt close to. "You said what I couldn't say to my dad. Thank you for this, Em. I needed it." I started replying one by one until my coffee went cold. "You're not alone," I wrote back to a stranger named Chloe from Oregon. "Keep creating." It felt strange and good, like I was finally speaking the language of people who actually heard me. By noon, my inbox was already overflowing. A small camera company had emailed about sending me their new ring light to review on your growing channel. Another wanted to collaborate on a podcast about digital storytelling. I reread the messages twice, unsure if they were real. 3 days ago, my family had laughed about my internet phase. Now actual brands were reaching out. It wasn't money yet, but it was movement. That afternoon, I decided to film again. I pushed my thrifted desk closer to the window, for better light, clipped the mic to my shirt, and hit record. Hey everyone, I began forcing a smile. I wanted to talk about failure today. The word echoed around the room heavier than I expected. Failure isn't final, it's data. It tells you what still matters enough to fight for. When I stopped filming my reflection on the dark screen, stared back tired, stubborn, hopeful, I uploaded it anyway. The old me would have overthought every edit, every breath. But something about that dinner, about hearing their laughter, had stripped me clean of pretense. If they already thought I was ridiculous, I might as well earn it on my own terms. By the end of the week, the video hit 10,000 views. That was more than any video I'd ever posted. I checked it 3 times to make sure it wasn't a glitch. 10,000. My channel had lived in quiet obscurity for years, and suddenly people were showing up. Comment after comment poured in. You make failure sound beautiful. My parents don't get it either, but I won't quit. I cried for a minute, softly, quietly, not from sadness but from release. It wasn't just a number. It was proof that I hadn't been wrong to keep going. Friday evening, Maya came over. She'd been my college roommate once now, a graphic designer who freelanced from coffee shops. She threw her bag on the couch and grinned. 10,000 views, huh? Look at you, influencer. I laughed. Don't start with that word. Too late, she teased. I already told my coworkers you're famous. We ordered cheap takeout and ate cross-legged on the floor. She pulled out her laptop, showing me a mock-up for a new banner design. Your old one looks like a high school PowerPoint, she said. Let's make it feel like a brand. I watched her type Echo Lens across the screen in bold white font. Echo what I asked. Echo Lens, she said. Because that's what you do, you reflect real emotions back to people. You make them feel heard. I didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the name. It felt right. Echo Lens. It was small, simple, but it carried something sacred. Over the next few days, we worked non-stop. I learned lighting setups from YouTube tutorials, rewrote my channel description, scheduled uploads, and even made a posting calendar. Ben, a friend from Maya's art circle, came by one afternoon with an old DSLR camera he offered to lend me. You'll get better footage, he said. Just promise me a shout-out when you hit 1 million. I laughed, shaking my head. Deal, but that's never happening. By the end of the month, my apartment looked like a studio tripod in the corner, sound foam taped to the wall, a sticky note that read consistency over perfection. Each morning I woke up early, outlined scripts, edited until midnight, and still managed to feel alive. The more I worked, the less I thought about my parents' laughter. The noise in my head quieted with every new upload. Then one night, while editing a video about creative burnout, my phone rang. It was Mom. The name flashing on the screen twisted something in my stomach. I hesitated before answering. Hey, Mom. Her voice was casual, too casual. Just checking in. How's everything? I stared at the timeline on my laptop, audio waves pulsing like a heartbeat. Good, I said. Busy. That's nice. We saw your video online, your cousin sent it. You're getting quite a following, huh? I couldn't tell if she was proud or curious. Something like that. There was a pause. Then she said, Just remember, not everything online is real, sweetheart. Be careful who you trust. I know, I said quietly. Thanks for the advice. She hesitated, then added, You should come by for Christmas. Your dad wants you home. I could almost hear the subtext. Now that you're doing okay, we can acknowledge you again. I smiled to myself, invisible to her. We'll see, I said, and hung up before she could fill the silence. After the call, I stared at the half-edited video. My voice on the playback said, Sometimes the people who doubt you aren't villains, they're just afraid of what your courage reminds them of. I stopped editing and just listened to that line again. Maybe it was true. Maybe Mom wasn't cruel, just scared. Still, fear wasn't an excuse to mock someone else's dream. The following morning, I woke to an email from a small podcast called Creators Unfiltered. They wanted to interview me about building something from rejection. My hands trembled as I typed back yes. The interview was simple and scripted. I spoke about burnout, about creating with nothing but conviction, about the Thanksgiving that started it all. They laughed, I said, and I listened. And maybe that's the difference. I learned how to build in silence. When the episode aired, messages flooded my inbox. A teacher from Chicago wrote, "Your story reminded me to pick up my camera again." A grandmother from Florida said, "I'm 70 and just started my first channel because of you." That night, Maya texted me a screenshot. Our video had hit the YouTube trending page. Number 47, but trending nonetheless. "Told you," she wrote. "Echo lens is real." I stared at the screen for a long time, remembering every cruel laugh, every dismissive look across the Thanksgiving table. For the first time, the memory didn't sting. It felt distant, almost tender. I whispered, "They don't know it yet, but they built this too." Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote down a promise. When this grows, it won't be about revenge. It'll be about proof. Outside, rain started to fall, tapping softly against the window. I sat there listening, coffee in hand, the glow of the monitor painting my face gold. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. By January, the gray skies over Austin had become my closest companion. Every morning I'd sit by the window with a mug of coffee gone lukewarm, watching fog roll between the buildings while the cursor blinked on my laptop screen. My next upload needed to matter. The comments were growing, the numbers climbing, but the noise inside me, the need to prove something, was louder than all of it. The world was finally watching, and I didn't want to blink first. I spent hours scrolling through messages from viewers. Some were sweet, others desperate. My parents told me art isn't real work. I dropped out of college, and your story made me feel less like a failure. Each one felt like a confession sent into the dark. I realized I wasn't just making videos anymore. I was answering a call I hadn't known existed. Maya stopped by that afternoon with her usual energy, tossing her coat on the chair. "Okay," she said. "We need to level up. The lighting is better, but the storytelling, it's missing something." She opened her laptop, showing me a spreadsheet of upload ideas. "How about a new series? Something personal but universal. People love transformation stories." I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. "You mean like glow-ups?" "No," she said, smiling. "Like redemption arcs. Real people, real pain, real comebacks." The word redemption lingered. It wasn't just a theme. It was my heartbeat. "What would we call it?" she thought for a moment. "How about second chances?" Ben arrived later that night, bringing takeout and his quiet steadiness. "I can help film interviews," he said. "We can shoot on weekends. Just don't forget to sleep." I laughed. "Sleep's overrated." Within days we were filming. We met a single dad who painted murals after losing his job, a former teacher who started a bakery from her garage, a retired nurse volunteering at shelters. Each story reminded me that resilience was contagious. In one episode, the dad said, "Failure's not the opposite of success. It's the training ground." I felt that sentence settle deep inside me, like it had been waiting for a home. The first Second Chances video went live on a Friday night. I remember watching the view counter tick like a heartbeat. 500 in the first hour, then 2,000, then 15,000 overnight. Comments poured in. This made me cry in the best way. Finally, something real on this platform. For the first time, I didn't refresh the page for validation. I just sat there in the soft glow of the monitor, letting the silence fill the room like peace instead of loneliness. A week later, the video passed 100,000 views. My inbox flooded with requests. A women's organization wanted to collaborate on a short film about hope after loss. A local news station emailed asking for an interview. I stared at the screen in disbelief. "Do you realize what's happening?" Maya asked over the phone. "Echo Lens isn't just a channel anymore. It's a movement." I wanted to laugh, but she wasn't wrong. My subscribers were doubling, my DMs overflowing, my world expanding faster than I could process. It was everything I had prayed for, and somehow still terrifying. Late one night, while editing a new video, I heard my father's voice in my head. "You can't live off likes forever." I paused the footage and stared at the still frame, an image of a woman smiling through tears. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who mocked my dream was now unknowingly inspiring every line I spoke on camera. I closed the laptop and leaned back. "What am I even doing this for?" I whispered. The question hung in the air unanswered. The next day, I filmed outside for the first time. Ben carried the camera while I stood in front of a graffiti-covered wall that read, "The world breaks you to shape you." I started talking not from a script but from memory. People think success is revenge. But maybe it's survival. Maybe it's just deciding not to disappear. When I watched the playback, there was no polish, no filters, just truth. And truth, I realized, doesn't need makeup. By February, the local paper ran a small feature titled "Austin Creator Redefines Storytelling." The photo showed me holding the camera with a messy bun and no makeup. My mother must have seen it because the next morning she texted, "Saw your article. Looks nice. You should fix your hair next time." I laughed out loud. That was her way of saying she was proud. It was almost sweet, almost. That same week, an email arrived from YouTube's Creator Partnership Program inviting me to a virtual panel about women building purpose-driven channels. My name was listed alongside creators I'd looked up to for years. I read it twice then, 3 times. Maya screamed through the phone when I told her. "You did it, Em. This is it, your breakthrough." I smiled but didn't answer, because the truth was part of me was afraid. What if they found out I was still filming in a 1-bedroom apartment with a borrowed camera? What if they realized I wasn't polished enough for their world? That fear followed me for days. I filmed anyway, my voice steady even as doubt whispered in the background. The night before the panel, Ben stayed over to test my setup. He adjusted the lighting, then looked at me seriously. "You belong in that room," he said. I nodded, pretending to believe it. The morning of the event, I put on my best blazer, the same one I'd worn to my last corporate job interview years ago, back when I still tried to fit into other people's definitions of success. Now it felt like armor. When my name flashed on the virtual screen, the moderator introduced me as Emily Carter, creator of Echo Lens, known for her authentic storytelling and emotional depth. My hands trembled as I unmuted. "Hi," I began. "I'm Emily. And for the longest time I thought failure meant I wasn't enough. Turns out it was just my teacher." The panel went better than I could have dreamed. When it ended, my DMs exploded. Viewers from around the world shared my quotes, my stories, my channel. I sat there in stunned silence, realizing that my voice, the one they'd laughed at last Thanksgiving, had become something people leaned in to hear. Later that evening, I opened a new email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Opportunity for Echo Lens." It was from a representative at an agency in New York offering sponsorships and speaking gigs. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the proposal. Emily Maya's voice came through the speakerphone. "You sound weird." "What's going on?" I swallowed. "They want to sign me," she screamed again. "Girl, this is huge." But as the excitement settled, another feeling crept in: hesitation. "What if I lose control?" I asked quietly. "What if it stops being mine?" Maya's tone softened. "Then you walk away. But at least you walk away knowing you were worth signing." That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the contract draft glowing on my laptop. My parents' voices echoed in my head, every word of doubt, every laugh. I imagined sitting at their table again, but this time with numbers they couldn't ignore. Instead of replying to the agency, I opened a blank document and began writing something else, a letter to myself. "You don't need to prove them wrong," I wrote. "You just need to prove yourself right." The next morning, I filmed a new video called "The Price of Belief." My eyes were tired, my voice steady. "People think faith is loud," I said into the camera. "It's not. It's what keeps you working when no one's clapping." When I uploaded it that night, I didn't check the views. I just watched the comments appear one after another like tiny lights in the dark. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I felt like I'd already found it. The first real check arrived on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't huge, just enough to cover rent and a week's groceries. But when I saw my name printed on that envelope from Google, I froze. I ran my fingers over the paper like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. "This is it," I whispered. The moment they stopped laughing. I set it on my desk beside the camera, a quiet trophy that no one else would ever see. I filmed a video that day called The First Dollar, where I talked about what it meant to finally get paid for something I built from scratch. It wasn't about money, not really. It was about validation, the proof that effort mattered even when no one clapped. The video blew up overnight. Comments flooded in. "You deserve this, crying with you right now. You give me hope to keep going." I sat on the floor with my laptop, watching the numbers climb, feeling a strange mix of pride and fear. By the weekend, EchoLens passed 100,000 subscribers. YouTube sent me the silver plaque a week later, neatly packaged with a letter that began, "Congratulations on your milestone." I held it up in front of the camera for a vlog, my smile trembling. "To everyone who ever said it's impossible, thank you. You made me stubborn enough to prove it wrong." Maya and Ben came over that night with champagne and grocery store cake. We toasted on my balcony, the city glowing below us. "You realize this makes you an actual influencer now," Ben said, teasing. "You're literally influencing people." I rolled my eyes. "Don't start," Maya laughed. "You earned this, Em. You didn't just build a channel, you built a movement." Her words echoed in my head long after they left. A movement. I'd never thought of it like that. All I wanted was to make something real, something honest. But maybe honesty was rarer than I'd realized. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a nonprofit called the Renewal Project. They'd seen my Second Chances series and wanted to collaborate on a campaign about women rebuilding their lives after loss. "We love your tone. Hopeful but grounded," they wrote. "We think your storytelling could help raise awareness." I reread the email twice before replying yes. The shoot took place in a small studio downtown. I interviewed 3 women, a cancer survivor, a single mother, and a war veteran who'd started painting as therapy. Between takes, I found myself crying behind the camera. Their voices cracked in the same places mine once had. They weren't polished, they were raw, and that made them beautiful. When I uploaded the final video, I didn't expect what happened next. Within 48 hours, it hit 1 million views. Celebrities shared it, news outlets picked it up, and the Renewal Project raised more money in 1 week than they had all year. My phone buzzed nonstop, emails, calls, texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Then came one I didn't expect. From Mom. Subject: "So proud of you." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The message was short. "We watched your new video. Your father says you've made something special. We didn't realize how many people you were helping. We're proud of you, sweetheart." I wanted to feel joy, and part of me did. But another part of me remembered that Thanksgiving table, the laughter, the dismissive smiles. Pride after proof it didn't taste the same. Still, I wrote back, "Thank you. That means a lot." The next day, I got a call from a talk show producer in Los Angeles. "We'd love to have you on for our Women Who Inspire segment," she said. "You're one of the most authentic creators we've seen." I almost dropped my phone. Me on TV. The same girl whose family once told her to get a real job. Maya insisted on coming with me. "You'll need backup," she said, half joking. Ben booked my flight, triple-checked the equipment, and told me to remember to breathe. When the plane landed in California, I felt like stepping into another life. Palm trees, ocean air, cameras, everything shiny and surreal. The studio lights were blinding. I sat across from the host, a woman with perfect hair and a rehearsed smile. "Emily Carter," she said, "creator of EchoLens, the channel changing millions of lives. How does it feel to be the internet's newest inspiration?" I laughed softly, my palms sweating. "It feels unreal. A year ago, I was filming in my kitchen, wondering if anyone cared. Now people tell me my videos help them survive hard days. It's humbling." The host smiled. "And your family, they must be so proud." That question hit like a pebble against glass, small but sharp. I forced a smile. "They are now." When the interview aired, my subscriber count jumped again. Messages poured in, teachers using my videos in classrooms, therapists showing them to patients. Brands reached out for sponsorships, most of which I turned down. I didn't want to become a commercial. I wanted to stay human. But with every new follower came new pressure. My inbox filled with requests, collabs, speaking gigs, media appearances. Everyone wanted a piece of what I'd built. Even good attention starts to feel heavy when it never stops. One night, after 12 hours of editing, I caught my reflection in the dark laptop screen. My eyes looked older, tired in a way that success couldn't fix. I whispered, "Don't lose yourself, Em. Not now." The next morning, I turned off my notifications and went for a walk by the lake. The winter air bit through my jacket, but it cleared my mind. I passed joggers, families, people laughing together. None of them knew who I was, and for once that anonymity felt like freedom. When I got back, I found a handwritten letter waiting by my door. No return address, just my name in neat cursive. Inside, a woman had written, "Your video saved me from giving up. Thank you for seeing people like me." At the bottom was a small drawing of a candle. I held the letter for a long time, tears stinging my eyes. That's when I understood something my parents never could. Fame isn't proof of worth. Connection is. That night I recorded a video in one take. No lighting setup, no edits, just my voice. "Success doesn't change who you are," I said. "It just reveals who's been watching." I didn't say their names, but I knew who I was talking to. By March, invitations started coming in for conferences and digital summits. I said yes to one in Chicago because I wanted to see how far my little idea could travel. On stage, under the bright lights, I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, all waiting for me to speak. My journey started with laughter. I began. Not the good kind, the kind that tells you you're foolish for dreaming. But dreams don't need applause to grow. They just need stubborn hearts. When I finished, the audience stood. A standing ovation. I smiled, but what I felt wasn't pride, it was peace. After the event, I sat alone backstage with my phone buzzing in my pocket. Another email from Mom. "Everyone at church saw your talk. You made us cry. Come home for Easter," I typed back. Maybe then stop deleting the word. I wasn't ready, not yet. Outside the window, snow was starting to fall, melting as it hit the pavement. I watched it disappear, tiny and silent, just like doubt when faced with purpose. For the first time since that awful Thanksgiving, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I'd already won. Not because the world was watching, but because I finally was. By spring, the rhythm of success had settled into something almost ordinary. My mornings began with coffee, camera setups, and a to-do list that stretched longer than I could ever finish. The numbers were unreal. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of followers, but the noise had softened into background hum. I'd stopped checking analytics the way I used to check my pulse. What mattered now wasn't how loud I could get. It was how true I could stay. One Tuesday, Maya burst into my apartment waving her phone like a trophy. "Em, you've been nominated for a Creator Impact Award. Do you even realize what that means?" She was already dancing before I could answer. Ben followed behind her, arms full of gear. "Also, you're trending in 3 countries," he added. I laughed, shaking my head. "You two need to get out more." But even as I said it, my chest filled with something soft and trembling. A year ago, I was editing videos at a kitchen table no one believed in. Now strangers across the world were repeating my words like gospel. The ceremony was held in Los Angeles, all lights and flashbulbs and champagne flutes. I wore a borrowed dress and the same thrift store heels from my college graduation. When they called my name, I froze for a second, hands slick with sweat. The stage lights hit like fire as I walked up, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. "This award," I began, voice unsteady, "isn't about numbers. It's about persistence. For anyone who's ever been laughed at for trying, keep trying. One day, they'll ask how you did it." The applause rose around me, bright and heavy. Backstage, Ben grinned like a proud brother. "You nailed it," he said. Maya took a selfie of the three of us, the award gleaming between us. Proof that underdogs bite back, she teased. But later that night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the trophy. It was beautiful, yes, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like validation I no longer needed. I set it on the dresser beside my phone and whispered, "This isn't the finish line." The next morning, I flew back to Austin. The city greeted me with gray skies and drizzle, familiar and grounding. When I walked into my apartment, the silver YouTube plaque still hung crooked on the wall. My plants had started to wilt. The ring light buzzed faintly in the corner. Success didn't look glamorous here. It looked like coffee stains and half-finished scripts. I liked it that way. By early summer, I was planning a new series, stories of women rebuilding their lives from small acts of defiance. I called it Ordinary Miracles. Maya designed the title card gold letters against soft blue. "Because that's what you've become," she said, "an ordinary miracle." Our first episode followed a retired teacher who taught free literacy classes to immigrants. She told me, "I don't do this for recognition. I do it because it feels like breathing." When I edited that footage, I cried quietly at my desk. There was something sacred in her humility, a reminder that purpose doesn't need permission. The series spread faster than I expected. Within weeks, every video crossed 1 million views. Comments overflowed with stories from viewers sharing their own small miracles. I pinned one, "Your kindness reminds me to keep believing." But success came with shadows. The more we grew, the more criticism appeared. "She's too polished. It's all staged. She's fake nice for clicks." Maya told me to ignore it. Ben wanted to disable comments altogether. I refused. If I want to share real stories, I said, I have to let people be real too, even when they're cruel. One evening, I was live streaming a Q&A when someone asked, "Do your parents finally respect what you do?" The question caught me off guard. I smiled carefully. "They're proud," I said. "We've come a long way." It wasn't a lie, not exactly, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was they hadn't called since Easter. Pride, it seemed, was something they practiced in private. After the stream, I sat alone under the studio lights, long after the cameras stopped rolling. The silence pressed heavy, thicker than applause. Ben poked his head in. "You good?" I nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He walked in and handed me a cup of tea. "You've done something huge, Em. Don't let ghosts ruin it." I smiled. "They don't ruin it. They just remind me why I started." A week later, an invitation arrived from YouTube. "Join us for the Global Creator Summit in San Francisco." I stared at the email for a long time. The event was invitation-only creators, with over 1 million subscribers, industry leaders, innovators. Me, the girl who once filmed on a borrowed camera. When I told Maya, she shrieked so loudly the neighbors probably hated us. "You're going to California again." But this time as the keynote speaker, I laughed nervously. "You think they'll listen to me?" "They already do," she said. Preparation took weeks. I wrote and rewrote my speech until it didn't sound like one, until it sounded like truth. On the flight there, I looked out the window at the clouds, thinking about the first time I'd heard my mother laugh at my hobby. Maybe she'd be watching now. Maybe she'd see. The conference was surreal, rows of cameras, creators I'd admired for years, the buzz of ambition thick in the air. When my name was announced, I walked on stage to polite applause, the kind that grows as people realize who you are. The spotlight was warm against my skin. "Hi," I began. "My name is Emily Carter, and I build stories out of silence." A ripple of quiet moved through the room. I continued, "A year ago, I sat at a Thanksgiving table where everyone laughed at me. They said my dream wasn't real, and for a while I believed them. But what they didn't understand was that silence can be power if you learn how to listen through it." When I finished, the crowd stood. I blinked back, tears bowing slightly. In that moment, I didn't feel like the girl who needed approval. I felt like the woman who had built something unbreakable. After the talk, people lined up to meet me, creators, journalists, even a few executives. A woman from YouTube's partnership team smiled and said, "You remind me why we started this platform." Her words meant more than the applause. That night, Maya and Ben and I celebrated with pizza and cheap champagne in the hotel room. We talked about everything and nothing, the future new projects, maybe even a podcast, but beneath the laughter, a quiet sense of closure hummed in me. For the first time, I realized the revenge I thought I wanted had already transformed into something else. It wasn't payback, it was peace. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. I opened my phone to check messages. At the top was one from Mom. "Saw your speech. Your father cried. We're proud beyond words." I stared at it, letting the words sink in. They'd said we're proud before, but this time it felt different. Not because I'd earned it, but because I didn't need it anymore. I typed back, "Tell Dad thank you." "I hope he's okay," then paused and added, "I'm okay too." Outside, the city woke slowly, the sound of gulls echoing from the bay. I watched them through the window, small specks of white moving freely in the light. For years, I'd wanted to soar past the people who doubted me. Now, I just wanted to stay grounded, to build something lasting beneath the noise. That night, before flying home, I stood by the water, the wind cold against my face. My reflection shimmered in the waves' tired eyes, soft smile. A woman I barely recognized but finally understood. They said it was a phase, I whispered to the wind. Guess it turned out to be a life. And for once, there was no bitterness in saying it. Only grace. The apartment felt too quiet when I got back from San Francisco. The suitcase sat unopened by the door, my award half hidden beneath a pile of mail. For days I floated through my routine: edit, upload emails, sleep, but something inside me had shifted. The applause from the summit still echoed faintly, but it didn't fill me like I thought it would. Instead, I felt calm, peaceful even. Maybe that was what winning was supposed to feel like, not fireworks, but a long exhale after years of holding your breath. Maya came by one morning, her laptop under one arm and 2 coffees in hand. "I've got an idea," she said, already rearranging things on my desk. "Echo Lens has to evolve. Let's start something bigger, like a collective. You, me, Ben. We'll help smaller creators find their voice." I blinked, still half asleep. "You mean like a company?" "Not a company," she said, grinning. "A home." Ben showed up later with his camera gear slung over his shoulder. "Echo Lens Collective," he said, testing the name out loud. "Sounds like something that matters." We set up a whiteboard and started scribbling plans, mentorship ideas, short films, collaborations with nonprofits. The studio was cramped, but it buzzed with purpose. We stayed up late, fueled by caffeine and possibility, mapping a future that felt bigger than any of us. Our first project was called Ordinary Miracles. Each episode told the story of someone who'd quietly changed their corner of the world. A bus driver who paid students' lunch debts. A grandmother who fostered abandoned dogs. A janitor who built free wheelchairs from scrap metal. These weren't viral stories, they were human ones, and that was exactly why they worked. The first episode went live on a Sunday evening. I remember watching the view count climb as if the internet was exhaling with me. Thousands of people commented within hours, sharing their own ordinary miracle. One wrote, "I'm 70 and just started volunteering because of this video." Another said, "You reminded me to look at people differently." By the end of the week, Ordinary Miracles had 5 million views. The numbers didn't thrill me anymore, but the letters did. Real handwritten letters started arriving at my P.O. box. People sent stories, poems, even photographs of their lives. I pinned them all over my wall until the studio looked like a living collage of humanity. One afternoon, while sorting through the pile, I found an envelope from a name I hadn't seen in months. Linda Carter. My mother's handwriting. Inside was a short note: "Saw your new series. It's beautiful. Your dad and I have been watching together. We're proud of you, honey." I stared at it for a long time. There was no guilt in her tone. This time, no backhanded concern, just words that sounded like peace. I folded the note carefully, and pinned it beside a letter from a viewer in Nebraska. That night, I filmed a quiet vlog titled, "Forgiveness Doesn't Mean Forgetting." I spoke directly to the camera, my voice steady. "Forgiveness isn't a trophy," I said. "It's just the decision to stop bleeding over the same wound." When I uploaded it, I didn't tag or promote it, but somehow it found its way to millions anyway. Weeks passed in a blur of projects. The collective grew fast. Ben handled production, Maya designed everything, and I became the accidental leader, the face of something that wasn't just about revenge or redemption anymore. It was about rebuilding. The success brought new attention. News outlets called Lens the heart of the internet. Podcasts wanted interviews. Invitations poured in for panels, brand deals, collaborations. We turned most of them down. "We can't help people if we're busy selling sneakers," I joked. But fame always finds cracks to crawl through. By summer, tabloids started digging into my past. Old classmates surfaced online claiming I'd exaggerated my struggles. Some said my family drama was fabricated. One gossip channel even accused me of hiring actors for ordinary miracles. I didn't respond. Ben wanted me to fight back. "You have proof, Em. You can shut them down." I shook my head. The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. So I did what I always did. I turned pain into purpose. We started a workshop series teaching creators how to tell honest stories without chasing trends. The first class was small, but by the third week it was packed. People came from all over, carrying notebooks and fear and hope in equal measure. During one session, a teenage girl stood up, hands shaking. "My dad says my art's a waste of time," she said. "But when I see your videos, I think maybe he's wrong." Her voice cracked on that last word. I felt something old and familiar rise in my throat, the ghost of my own doubt. "He's not wrong to worry," I told her softly. "He's wrong to laugh. Don't stop because of his fear. Build in silence until it speaks for itself." When the session ended, she hugged me. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, as the studio emptied, I stayed behind alone. The hum of the equipment filled the space like a heartbeat. I looked around the cameras, the sticky notes, the laughter lingering in the air, and realized this was the revenge I'd wanted all along. Not to hurt anyone, but to build something so good that it erased the need to fight. A few days later, YouTube emailed again. "Congratulations. Lens has reached 1,000,000,000 subscribers. 10 million. I read the number 3 times, waiting for it to feel real. It didn't. Maya brought cupcakes, Ben brought champagne, and we celebrated in the studio like kids. 10 million, Maya yelled. "Do you get how insane that is?" I smiled, wiping frosting from my fingers. "I get it. But the numbers, not the miracle. The people are." Later that evening, after everyone left, I sat alone with the laptop open. The newest episode had already crossed 1 million views. I scrolled through the comments, the gratitude pouring out of strangers who somehow felt like family. Then, tucked between 2 heart emojis, I saw a username that made my stomach twist. Lindak, real. "Proud of you, sweetie. Just wish you'd remembered who raised you." I read it twice, unsure if it was really her or a troll pretending to be. Either way, it hurt. My chest tightened the way it used to at those family dinners. I closed the laptop slowly, the glow fading into darkness. Ben texted an hour later. "You okay?" I stared at the screen, thinking of how to reply. Then I typed back, "Yeah." Just remembering where I started. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked out onto the balcony, the city spread below like a sea of lights. I thought about my parents, their laughter, their pride, their confusion. I thought about every cruel comment that had turned into motivation, every silence that had taught me strength. The wind was cold, but it felt good. It reminded me I was still alive, still unfinished. Down in the street, someone was playing guitar, the sound faint and uneven but earnest. I leaned against the railing, listening. Success hadn't quieted the noise, it had just changed its shape. The world was still loud, still watching. But inside that chaos, I'd carved out my own kind of quiet. I went back inside and sat at my desk. The camera's red light blinked at me, waiting. I hit record. They used to say silence was weakness, I said softly. But I've learned it's a language. You just have to decide what story it tells. I paused, smiled, and added, mine says I'm still here. When I finished, I didn't upload it. I just saved it to a folder called The Quiet Comeback. It wasn't for the world. It was for me. The first hint that something was wrong came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of editing a new episode when Ben walked in, his expression tight. Emily, he said, holding his phone out. You need to see this. On the screen was a headline, Echo Lens Success Story or Family Betrayal, Inside the Rift Between Emily Carter and Her Parents. Below it, a photo of me standing on stage at the summit next to a cropped image of my mother at a church charity event. The article claimed that I had exploited private family drama to build my channel's emotional brand. My throat went dry as I scrolled. There were quotes, supposedly from family friends, saying I'd exaggerated everything for sympathy, that I'd painted my parents as villains for attention. Ben hovered nearby. We both know it's garbage, but it's spreading fast. How fast? Fast enough that it's trending. I closed my laptop slowly, forcing my voice calm. Okay, let's not panic. Maya arrived 10 minutes later, already scrolling through her phone. They're twisting the Thanksgiving story, she said. People are sharing clips from your old videos out of context. They're saying you monetize trauma. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my teeth. Of course they are. Ben kicked a chair leg. You have to respond, Em. Put out a statement, something. No, I said. We don't feed it. We wait. He frowned. That silence thing again. It's worked before. Maya crossed her arms. This isn't just gossip, Em. This is personal. They're dragging your parents' names through the mud, too. That hit harder than I expected. I hadn't spoken to Mom or Dad in months, but the thought of them caught in this storm made my chest ache. If they want to talk, I said quietly, they know where to find me. By evening, hashtags had started trending, number Echo Lens Lies and number Family First. Strangers were dissecting my life, posting screenshots of Thanksgiving vlogs, comparing timelines, even tracking down my old school photos. I shut my phone off and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Fame was strange that way, it turned whispers into earthquakes overnight. The next morning my inbox was full. Half were messages of support. The other half were accusations. One said, "You sold your family for views." Another, "We thought you were different." At noon, I got a call from my mother. My hands shook before I even answered. Mom, her voice was calm, but the kind of calm that hides sharp edges. I've been getting calls, Emily. People asking if what they're saying is true. Did you tell the world we mocked you? I swallowed. I didn't tell them anything that wasn't true. You embarrassed us, she said. Do you have any idea what this looks like? I didn't ask them to write that article. But you gave them a story to twist. The silence stretched. I could hear her breathing on the line, short and shallow. I'm sorry this hurts you, I said finally. But you laughed, Mom. You and Dad both. I heard you. That's where this all began. She exhaled sharply. We were joking. Families joke. Some jokes leave scars. Another silence. Then softer, you've changed. I had to. When the call ended, I sat staring at the blank screen for a long time. My heart felt both hollow and heavy. For years, I'd imagined what I'd say if she ever admitted that night happened. I never thought the truth would sting this much. By the next day, the tabloids had escalated. A gossip channel released an exclusive interview with a woman claiming to be my cousin, someone I barely remembered. She said I was manipulative, that I'd cut off my family for fame. The clip went viral within hours. Maya slammed her laptop shut when she saw it. That's it. I'm drafting a legal response. No, I said quietly. Let them burn it out. Emily, I mean it. I won't fight lies with noise, she groaned, pacing. You're infuriating sometimes, maybe, I said, but I'm still right. That night I filmed. The studio was dim lit only by the soft glow of my monitor. I didn't write a script, I just spoke. People are saying a lot about me right now, I began, and some of it hurts. But here's the thing, silence isn't weakness. It's space. And in that space, truth breathes. I uploaded it without tags, without monetization. Within a day, it had 20 million views. The comments were split half angry, half in awe. But one stood out. It was from a woman named Cynthia M., who wrote, "When my daughter told me she wanted to start a channel, I said she'd never make it. Then I saw your videos. Now I see her differently. Thank you for reminding me what belief looks like." I reread it until the words blurred. That evening, Ben came over with takeout. "Your videos everywhere," he said. "Half the internet's calling it the calmest mic drop in history." I smiled faintly. "I didn't mean it as a mic drop. Doesn't matter. You took control of the narrative without saying their names. That's power." Maybe he was right, but I wasn't thinking about power, I was thinking about peace. The weekend arrived with another surprise. A journalist from the Chronicle reached out asking for an interview. "We want to set the record straight," she said. "We've done some digging. There's evidence that the original article was funded by a PR firm one your sister's company has ties to." I felt my pulse skip. "You're sure positive? We'll publish with or without your comment." I hesitated. "No comment," I said finally. "Let the facts speak." When the piece went live 3 days later, it exploded. The headline read, "Inside the Manufactured Scandal, How a PR Stunt Tried to Tear Down EchoLens." Screenshots of emails were attached showing my sister's agency pitching stories to tabloids exaggerating family tensions. The internet flipped overnight. Hashtags changed from number EchoLens lies to number justice for Emily. Maya showed me her phone grinning. "Karma works fast these days." Ben leaned against the desk, shaking his head. "She really tried to profit off you," I nodded slowly. "She always liked a spotlight. I just didn't think she'd burn me to keep it." Later that night, I got a text from an unknown number. "I never meant for it to go this far. Please call me." I stared at the message, knowing exactly who it was. "Chloe." I didn't reply. The following week, EchoLens hit a record high. Sponsors returned. Viewers flooded the comment sections with apologies, with gratitude, with renewed faith. But none of it felt like victory. It felt like standing in the ruins of something that should have never caught fire. I spent that Sunday at the park watching kids chase kites under the Texas sky. Their laughter was easy, weightless. Mine hadn't been for a long time. I took a deep breath and whispered, "You can stop fighting now." When I got home, I opened my father's old journal, the one I'd kept hidden in a drawer. Inside, he'd once written, "What others call stubbornness, I call staying power. Build quietly. The storm passes." I smiled through tears. He'd always understood before anyone else did. That night, I set my phone on silent, closed the laptop, and let the world spin without me. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft and steady. It sounded less like warning and more like applause. Maybe the truth wasn't loud after all. Maybe it just waited, patient, inevitable, until the world grew quiet enough to hear it. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, turning the Austin streets into mirrors. I sat by the window, coffee cooling beside my laptop, trying to process everything that had happened. The scandal, the exposure, the apology that never came, it all felt like a fever dream I hadn't fully woken from. Outside, the sky was a dull gray, heavy with unfinished storms. Inside, EchoLens was thriving more than ever. 10 million subscribers, a global audience, partnerships flooding in. But I couldn't enjoy any of it. Not yet. Maya and Ben were in the studio early that morning, prepping for our next big shoot. The walls were covered in storyboards, sticky notes, and printouts of letters from fans. "You realize," Maya said, adjusting her glasses, "this next project might actually break the internet." Ben laughed. "Yeah, but in a good way this time." I smiled faintly. Let's hope. The project was called The Power of Quiet. It wasn't just another series, it was personal. I wanted to explore how silence shapes resilience, how listening could heal more than shouting ever could. I didn't tell them, but the idea was born from those sleepless nights after my sister's betrayal. I wanted to reclaim silence as something beautiful again. We started filming at sunrise. Our first subject was a widowed music teacher who'd lost her hearing but still conducted her students through vibration and rhythm. Watching her, I felt something click inside me, a reminder of why I'd started all this. Not for validation, not for fame, but for connection. After the interview, Ben packed up the camera while I lingered in the empty classroom, tracing my fingers across the piano keys. The sound was soft, uneven. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said, just remembering where I came from. He nodded. "You know, Em, your story's changed a lot of lives. Maybe it's time to let it change yours too." That night when I got home, there was a package waiting by the door. No return address, just my name, written in familiar looping handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a small photo frame Thanksgiving 5 years ago. Me, Mom, Dad, and Chloe all smiling around the table. It looked like a normal family. Tucked behind the frame was a note. "I miss when things were simple. I'm sorry I made them harder." See, I sank onto the couch, the weight of the photo pressing into my chest. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at those frozen smiles. Then I whispered, "It was never simple, Chloe. You just didn't see it." The next morning, I called my mother. The phone rang longer than usual before she picked up. "Emily, hey Mom," I said softly. "I got a note from Chloe." A pause, then a sigh. "She's been quiet lately. I think she's lost." "She'll find her way," I said. "She always does." "I saw your new video, Mom," said her voice, trembling just slightly. "It made me cry. You've grown into someone strong. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." My throat tightened. "I'm just glad you see it now." After we hung up, I felt lighter. Not healed, but lighter. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about deserving. It's about release. 2 days later, I woke up to a flood of messages. The Power of Quiet had gone viral overnight. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. Major outlets were calling it the video that redefined storytelling. I opened the comment section, scrolling through thousands of messages from viewers, thanking me for making silence sacred again. Among them was one from a username that made my heart skip C, Hayes Official. "You turned our noise into something beautiful. Thank you." I stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop. Maybe that was all the apology I'd ever get. Maybe it was enough. By summer, everything accelerated. We signed new contracts, hired staff, opened a second office in Los Angeles. Maya handled the creative direction. Ben oversaw production. I was flying back and forth between cities, juggling meetings, interviews, and content creation. Success had become a rhythm, loud, relentless, and oddly lonely. One night, during a layover in Denver, I found myself scrolling through old videos on my phone, the first Thanksgiving vlog, the shaky shots of my tiny apartment, the nervous smile I used to hide behind. It felt like another lifetime. The comments from those early days still lived there, people believing in me when no one else did. A man across the aisle recognized me and said, "You're that YouTube girl, right?" "The quiet one," I smiled. "Something like that." He nodded. "My wife watches you. Said your videos got her through chemo. Thank you." His words stayed with me the rest of the flight. I realized that no headline, no betrayal, no scandal could ever erase what mattered. I hadn't built a brand. I'd built belonging. When I landed in Los Angeles, the air was thick with heat and possibility. The new office was modern, and bright walls lined with framed stills from Ordinary Miracles and The Power of Quiet. Our team had doubled, and the sound of laughter and typing filled every corner. Maya greeted me with a grin. "Welcome to headquarters, boss." I rolled my eyes. "Don't call me that." Ben appeared behind her holding a thick envelope. "You might want to sit down for this." Inside was a proposal from a global streaming platform, an offer to turn EchoLens originals into a documentary series. The budget was staggering. The reach would be worldwide. "This is it," Ben said, grinning. "This is what you've been working for." But all I could think was how surreal it felt. The same people who once told me to give up now wanted to buy my story. That evening, I walked along the beach, the Pacific wind whipping my hair into my face. Somewhere behind me, laughter rose from a bonfire. I thought of my parents, of Chloe, of the Thanksgiving that started it all. I picked up a shell from the wet sand, smooth and cold in my hand. "Do you ever think about how weird it is," Ben said, catching up to me, "that all this started because of a single conversation you weren't supposed to hear?" I smiled. "Every day." He looked out at the horizon. "Do you ever regret it?" I shook my head. "No. The pain built the bridge." That night I called my mom again. "We're filming a docuseries," I said. "They want to feature the origin story. I wanted to ask if you'd be okay with that." There was a pause, then her quiet laugh. "You mean the Thanksgiving story?" "Yeah." "Well, she said it's about time people saw what forgiveness looks like." The next week the crew came to my parents' house. For the first time in years, I walked through that front door without dread. The smell of cinnamon candles and roast turkey hit me instantly, like time had looped back. Mom hugged me tightly. Dad smiled, his eyes glassy. Chloe stood near the fireplace, hesitant but sincere. "Hi, Em," she said softly. "Hi." We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. The cameras rolled quietly as we sat around the table, the same table where the laughter once stung like knives. Now it just sounded human. When the director asked how it felt to revisit that moment, I smiled. "Pain ages differently," I said. "Sometimes it becomes purpose." Later, when the lights were packed and the crew left, Mom poured coffee for all of us. "You know," she said, "I used to think silence was avoidance. Now I see it's grace." I met her eyes and nodded. "It's both, depending on who's listening." Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For the first time in years, her grip didn't feel like apology, it felt like understanding. As I drove home that night, the road shimmered under the moonlight. My phone buzzed with notifications, articles, mentions, fan reactions, but I ignored them. Instead, I rolled down the window and let the wind fill the car. The air smelled like rain again, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with release. And maybe that's the quietest victory of all. The morning the documentary premiered, I woke up before sunrise. The city outside my window was still half asleep, wrapped in soft blue light. My phone buzzed, non-stop texts, emails, press alerts, but I didn't open any of them. For once, I wanted to feel the moment without measuring it. The past few years had taught me that the quiet before impact was sacred. I made coffee, sat on the balcony, and watched the sun climb over the skyline. Down below, cars moved like tiny sparks through the streets, people hurrying toward their own stories. Somewhere in homes across the world, my voice would be playing on televisions, laptops, phones. I'd told my team not to make a big event of it, no live stream, no watch party. This story began in private, it should unfold that way too. When I finally pressed play, the opening shot filled the screen, me sitting in the same garage where EchoLens was born, the light soft and golden. The narrator's voice, cut in, Emily Carter, built her empire from the silence most people run from. My throat tightened. I didn't realize how emotional it would feel to see it all stitched together, the nights of soldering circuits, the Thanksgiving laughter, the letters on the wall, even the fight that almost destroyed everything. Halfway through, my phone vibrated again. It was a text from Chloe, watching now. "Thank you for telling the truth without making me the villain." I smiled faintly. "You told your own story," I typed back. I just stopped rewriting mine. By the time the credits rolled, the internet had already exploded. The Power of Quiet was trending worldwide. People were posting clips of the scene where my mother apologized, where Chloe admitted she'd been jealous, where I said, Silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I didn't expect it to hit so hard, but within hours, journalists, influencers, and even psychologists were quoting lines from it. Someone tweeted, "This isn't a documentary, it's a love letter to resilience." Maya called 30 minutes later. "You need to look at these numbers," she said, her voice buzzing with disbelief. 10 million views in the first hour. That's insane." Ben chimed in on speakerphone. "And every major network wants an interview. They're calling you the face of creative redemption." I laughed softly. "That sounds dramatic." "Yeah," Maya said. "But so were you." The rest of the day passed in a blur. My inbox flooded with invitations, conferences, magazines, brand deals. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. A luxury brand offered a partnership. A university asked me to give a commencement speech. Even a network executive from New York pitched a talk show built around empathy. But what mattered most wasn't the noise, it was the letters. Viewers from around the world sent handwritten notes to the Echo Lens office. One came from a retired coal miner in West Virginia. "You reminded me that dignity doesn't retire," he wrote. Another from a young woman in Kenya. "My parents laughed when I said I wanted to film stories. I showed them yours. Now they help me record." By evening, Maya had set up a small celebration in the studio. The space looked exactly as it always did, chaotic, cluttered, alive. Strings of fairy lights hung from the ceiling, the air thick with the smell of takeout and coffee. She handed me a cupcake topped with a single candle. "For the girl who made silence loud enough to change the world," she said. I laughed. "You're going to make me cry on camera again." Ben raised his glass. "To Echo Lens," he said, "and to proving that revenge doesn't need to scream, it just needs to keep showing up." We clinked glasses, the sound small but satisfying. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone at my desk. The studio lights were off, leaving only the soft glow of my computer screen. The comment section of the documentary played like a heartbeat, thousands of people sharing their own stories of being underestimated. I scrolled for hours reading until my eyes burned. Then I saw a familiar name, Linda Carter. Her comment read, "Sometimes as parents we think silence is the same as strength." Watching this, I realized it can also be love. "I'm proud of the woman you've become, Emily. Love, Mom." Tears blurred the screen. It wasn't dramatic or public. It was just her speaking the language I'd spent years trying to teach her. The following morning, the Chronicle ran a new headline, "From Mockery to Mastery: How Emily Carter Turned a Family Rift into a Global Movement." They called me the architect of quiet rebellion. I didn't like the word rebellion, it sounded angry, but maybe that was part of the truth. That week I flew to New York for a panel on digital storytelling. The event was packed: executives, creators, journalists, even a few politicians. As I waited backstage, a producer approached me with a nervous smile. "Your documentary hit 100 million views," she said. "That's the fastest in the platform's history." I just nodded. "That's surreal." When I stepped on stage, the applause was overwhelming. I took a moment before speaking, letting the sound settle. "A few years ago, someone told me I was wasting my life chasing a dead dream. I believed them for a while. But dreams don't die, they wait for you to outgrow your fear." The audience fell silent. I could see people wiping their eyes. When I finished, they stood. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me. Her voice trembled as she said, "My son's an artist. I told him to get a real job. Tonight I'm going to call him and tell him I was wrong." I smiled, feeling the lump in my throat again. "He'll appreciate that more than you know." On the flight home, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I thought about that first Thanksgiving, the laughter, the sting, the way I'd sat in silence, promising myself I'd turn pain into power. Now here I was, miles above the clouds, living proof that I had. When I landed, the world felt different. Not brighter, not louder, just balanced. I went straight to my parents' house, without warning them. The porch light was still the same soft amber glow. When Mom opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, then softened. Hi, I said. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered. Dinner's still warm. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't need to. Dad asked about the documentary, Mom showed me her garden, and we ate quietly the way families do when words are too small for what's been repaired. Before I left, Mom hugged me tight. You know, she said, we used to think success meant proving people wrong. Now I see it's about proving yourself right. I smiled through tears. You sound like me. She laughed softly. Guess I finally learned from the best. Driving home, I rolled down the windows and let the summer air rush in. The night smelled like rain and forgiveness. I thought about Chloe somewhere out there rebuilding her own life. I hoped she was finding peace, too. When I reached the city, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya. CNN just called. They want you for a segment tomorrow. Something about how you redefined revenge. I laughed, shaking my head. Tell them it's not revenge. It's recovery. The light turned green, and I drove through the intersection headlights, gliding over the wet pavement. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anything, not validation, not recognition. I was just moving forward. The world could keep its noise. I'd found my own kind of sound. The quiet kind that hums inside you when you finally stop proving and start living. The call from CNN came early in the morning. I was still in my pajamas, hair messy, a mug of coffee halfway to my lips, when Maya burst into the apartment holding her laptop like a trophy. They want you live. Tomorrow night. Prime time, she said breathlessly. You're going to be on national television, Em. I laughed, the sound half disbelief, half exhaustion. Are you sure they didn't mean another Emily Carter? Ben grinned from the couch. Nope, they mean the one who turned silence into an empire. I set my mug down and rubbed my temples. Great. National TV. I can already hear my mother's phone blowing up. But the truth was, part of me wanted to do it. Not for fame or even validation, just to close the loop. To say in front of the same kind of people who once laughed at me that I hadn't needed their permission to become who I was. The studio lights the next evening were blinding. I sat across from the anchor, a polished woman with a calm smile and eyes that said she'd done this 1,000 times. Emily Carter, she began, your story has inspired millions. You built EchoLens from a laptop and a dream, and now it's a global movement. But I have to ask, when you look back at everything you went through, was it revenge that drove you? I smiled softly, already knowing that question was coming. No, I said. It started as pain, then it became purpose. The difference between revenge and redemption is what you do after the laughter fades. She nodded thoughtfully. And what do your parents think now? I took a slow breath. They're proud. We all grew up a little. Sometimes love has to fall apart before it learns how to stand on its own. When the segment aired, the internet lit up all over again. Clips of the interview flooded TikTok, and YouTube spliced with old footage from my garage days. Commentators called it a masterclass in grace. Someone even tweeted, "Revenge doesn't need to be loud." Emily Carter proved that. I turned off my phone that night and went for a walk by the lake. The air smelled like rain and cedar. Couples strolled by holding hands. Across the water, the city lights shimmered like they were applauding. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing anymore. I was just existing. A few days later, I flew to Los Angeles for a conference on women in tech. I'd been asked to give the keynote speech. The room was packed, hundreds of young women with notebooks, laptops, and eyes that reminded me of my own years ago, full of fire and fear. I stepped on stage, the hum of anticipation thick around me. When I started, I said, people told me I was wasting my life, that the internet was a fad, that no one cared about stories anymore. But stories are how we survive each other. And silence isn't the opposite of noise, it's where meaning hides until you're brave enough to speak. The audience went quiet in that beautiful collective way. That means they're listening with their whole hearts. When the applause finally came, it felt less like celebration and more like connection. After the event, a young woman approached me in the hallway holding a crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote this because of you," she said, her voice trembling. She unfolded it, lyrics, a poem, something raw and beautiful. You taught me that small voices still matter. I hugged her. They always will, I said. That night, back at the hotel, I stood on the balcony overlooking downtown. My phone buzzed with another message from home. This time it was Dad. Saw your interview. You've become the best kind of teacher, the kind who doesn't even know she's teaching. I smiled. Dad had always been the quiet one, the observer. I typed back. Everything I learned about patience came from you. The next morning, Maya called. You're not going to believe this, she said. Echo Lens just hit 15 million subscribers, and Forbes wants to feature you on their Women Who Built the Future issue. I groaned playfully. You're going to make me allergic to compliments. She laughed. Too late. You already built your own category. Ben chimed in from the background. Don't forget the charity gala next week, the one honoring Echo Lens for community impact. Oh, right, I said, pretending to groan again. Remind me why I agreed to wear heels in public. The gala was held in San Francisco, a city draped in gold light and glass towers. I wore a simple black dress, the same one from the first award I ever won, because it felt like coming full circle. Reporters lined the red carpet, flashbulbs popping like tiny fireworks. I wasn't nervous this time. I'd learned how to carry silence like armor. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and soft jazz. When they called my name for the award, I walked on stage to another round of applause. When I started Echo Lens, I said I just wanted to be heard. What I didn't realize was how many people were waiting for the same thing. This isn't my story anymore, it's ours. Afterward, as people mingled and champagne flowed, I noticed a familiar figure near the back of the room. Chloe. She looked different, older, softer somehow. She smiled when she saw me and walked over. Hey, Em, she said. You look radiant. Thanks, I replied genuinely. You too. She hesitated. I didn't come here for the cameras. I just wanted to say congratulations. And thank you for not ruining me when you could have. I met her eyes. That was never what I wanted. I know, she said quietly. I used to think success meant being seen. You taught me it's about what you build when no one's watching. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded. It was just us two sisters finally standing in the same truth. You're still building, Chloe, I said. You've got time. She smiled through tears. So do you. Maybe this time we can build something together. We didn't promise anything concrete, but as we hugged, I felt something loosen inside me, a thread of old pain finally untangling. When I got home that night, I set the award on my shelf next to the first check I ever earned and the silver YouTube plaque that started it all. Each one was a marker not of victory but of survival. The next day, I filmed a video called What Silence Taught Me. It wasn't rehearsed or edited, just me sitting on the floor of my studio, sunlight spilling across the room. When I was 27, I thought success was about proving people wrong. Now I know it's about proving myself right. The world's going to laugh. Let it. Just don't stop building while they do. When I finished recording, I didn't hit upload right away. I sat there for a while, staring at the blinking cursor, thinking about that Thanksgiving night, about how it all began with a moment of humiliation, and how that moment became the foundation of everything that followed. Outside, the first signs of autumn were already creeping in the scent of rain, the rustle of dry leaves. It reminded me of endings that weren't really endings at all, just quieter beginnings. I finally pressed upload. The video went live, and within hours the comments flooded in. This made me cry. I needed this today. My parents laughed too, but now I'm learning to smile through it. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled. The world was still loud, unpredictable, chaotic, but inside I felt still. Somewhere between the laughter and the silence I had found myself, and I wasn't about to lose her again. Autumn came quietly that year, the kind that painted Austin in amber and gold. The air was cooler, sharper, full of endings that didn't quite feel sad. My days fell into a rhythm I hadn't known before, steady, calm, almost ordinary. No scandals, no breaking headlines, just work that mattered. Echo Lens had grown into something far beyond me. Our collective now had 15 creators, 3 editors, and a small staff who handled everything from community outreach to translations. Every day, thousands of people tuned in to watch stories about resilience, empathy, and rebuilding. It wasn't just my voice anymore, it was a chorus. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to carry it alone. One morning, I came into the studio early. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the light slanted through the blinds in soft stripes across the floor. The walls were covered with letters again. Some typed, some handwritten, some crayon drawings from kids who'd seen our videos in classrooms. I ran my fingers over one that said, "Thank you for making me believe I'm not too late to start." That was the kind of success that didn't make headlines but stayed in your heart. Ben arrived a few minutes later, coffee in one hand, a small box in the other. "Mail came early," he said, setting it down on my desk. "Looks important." The return address read, YouTube headquarters. I smiled and opened it. Inside was a sleek gold plaque, the 10 million subscriber award engraved with Echo Lens Collective. I turned it over in my hands, the metal warm from the morning light. "Looks good next to your first one," Ben said. "Feels different," I replied. "How so?" "The first one was proof I mattered," I said quietly. "This one's proof others do too." He smiled, nodding. "You've changed, Em." "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally grew into who I was trying to be." Later that afternoon, Maya joined us for our weekly planning meeting. She spread out papers across the table, her excitement contagious. "Okay," she said, "listen to this. We've been offered a grant to start a mentorship fund for young storytellers from underrepresented communities. They want you to lead it." I blinked. "Me, who else?" she said, grinning. "It's literally your whole thing, turning doubt into purpose." I laughed softly. "Guess I can't say no to that." We spent the next few hours sketching ideas, brainstorming names. When Maya suggested calling it the Hayes Initiative, I froze. "You sure?" I asked. "Of course," she said gently. "You always say your father's words guided you. Let them guide others too." For a moment I couldn't speak. The image of my dad's old notebook flashed in my mind, those 6 words written in blocky pen strokes: "Energy belongs to those who dare." I nodded, swallowing hard. Then it settled. By evening the proposal was ready. I sent it off with a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just legacy, it was continuation. That night I got a call from Chloe. It had been weeks since we'd last spoken, but her voice was lighter now, almost playful. Guess what she said? "I started consulting for a mental health nonprofit. They're small, but the work feels real." I smiled. "That's amazing, Chloe." She laughed softly. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised," I said. "Just proud." There was a pause on the line, the kind that felt more like gratitude than silence. "You know," she said, "I used to think your success made me smaller. Now I realize it just showed me I could grow too." I felt tears prick my eyes. "We're both still growing." "Yeah," she whispered. "But this time, in the same direction." When the call ended, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the city lights flicker like distant campfires. For years, I'd chased healing like it was something external. Something you achieved, checked off, displayed. But maybe healing wasn't a finish line at all. Maybe it was just learning how to hold peace without breaking it. The next week, I was invited to speak at a Global Creators Summit in New York. It was the kind of event I used to dream about, but also the kind that no longer defined me. Still, I said yes, not to prove anything, but to remind myself how far I'd come. The flight there was quiet. I sat by the window watching clouds move like continents of light. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, calmer, and maybe finally whole. When I arrived at the venue, the energy was electric. Thousands of creators filled the hall, buzzing with excitement. On the giant screen behind the stage, the words, "Voices that changed the world," flashed in gold. When it was my turn, I stepped into the spotlight. The room dimmed. I could see faces glowing from phone screens, eyes expectant. I used to think success was about being seen, I began. But it's really about what you see in others. My story started with laughter, cruel laughter, but I learned something: people will mock what they don't understand. So you have two choices. You can shrink to fit their comfort, or you can grow until their noise sounds small. A murmur rippled through the crowd, then quiet, real listening quiet. I used to chase revenge, I continued, but revenge is a temporary victory. Redemption lasts longer. When you build something honest, something kind, it outlives the noise. By the time I finished, the audience was on their feet. The applause rolled over me like a wave. I smiled not from pride, but from peace. After the panel, a young man stopped me in the hallway. "My mom showed me your Thanksgiving story," he said. "I thought it was just another internet sob story. But then I watched the part where you forgave your family. I didn't talk to my dad for 6 years. I called him last week. I placed a hand over my heart. That's the real story," I said. He grinned. "Yeah, guess silence really does speak." On the flight home, I wrote in my journal the same habit I'd had since the beginning. "It's strange," I wrote. "The girl who used to beg for acknowledgement now just wants stillness. Maybe that's what growth looks like: less noise, more clarity." When I landed, there was another surprise waiting. A letter, this time from YouTube's CEO, congratulating me for the Impact Fund. They wanted to partner, officially funding scholarships for creators across the globe. I showed it to Maya and Ben the next morning. Ben let out a low whistle. "You realize this means you're basically changing the industry, right?" Maya smirked. "All from a stupid YouTube channel." We all laughed, the kind of deep, full laughter that shakes something loose. Later that day, I went for a walk near the lake, where I used to sit and dream of proving everyone wrong. The trees reflected perfectly in the still water. I sat on the same bench, ran my fingers over the worn wood, and whispered, "You did it." But what I felt wasn't triumph, it was gratitude. Gratitude for the silence that once hurt me. Gratitude for the laughter that fueled me. Gratitude for the chance to start again, not as a wounded daughter, but as a woman who'd built her own kind of family from truth. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the water to gold. I pulled my phone from my pocket, snapped a photo, and posted it with a caption that read, "Forgiveness is louder than revenge. Always." When I set the phone down, I smiled at the reflection staring back from the water. She didn't look like someone who needed to be heard anymore. She looked like someone who finally listened to the world, to others, to herself. Winter came slower that year, soft and golden instead of gray. The city shimmered, with quiet lights strung along shop windows, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain. I stood by the window of my new apartment, overlooking downtown Austin, watching people hurry past, bundled in scarves, carrying gifts and laughter. Somewhere below, a street musician was playing Silent Night on a worn guitar. I smiled, because for once the silence in my life wasn't empty, it was earned. EchoLens had just celebrated its 10th anniversary. 10 years since that Thanksgiving dinner when I'd sat at the table, humiliated, too afraid to speak. 10 years since I decided that silence could build something stronger than applause. And now here I was, preparing for the company's anniversary gala, surrounded by everything I once thought I'd never have: peace, purpose, and people who believed in me without needing proof. The event was being held at the Thomas Hayes Innovation Center, our new headquarters, named after my father. The building gleamed with glass and light, every inch alive with stories, portraits of creators we'd mentored, photos from projects that changed lives, notes from viewers around the world. Sometimes I still couldn't believe it was real. That morning, Maya stopped by with a garment bag over her shoulder and a mischievous grin. "Before you panic, yes, I picked out your outfit," she said, tossing it onto the couch. "You're the guest of honor, Em. You don't get to show up in jeans this time." Ben followed behind her with his usual calm smile, carrying 2 coffees and a clipboard full of logistics. "Everything's set," he said. "Press, guest list, catering, all smooth. For once, nothing's on fire." I laughed. "You say that now." He grinned. "Give it time." That night, the Innovation Center glowed like a lantern in the cold. Inside, hundreds of people gathered: creators, investors, volunteers, old friends, and even my family. When I stepped onto the balcony overlooking the atrium, a hush fell. For a heartbeat, I was back in that small apartment, sitting under a single lamp with my camera, and too many doubts. Then the lights dimmed, and Maya took the stage to introduce me. 10 years ago, she began. Emily Carter turned a moment of humiliation into a movement. She showed us that silence can roar, and that kindness can rebuild what ego destroys. Tonight, we celebrate the woman who taught the world how to listen. The applause rose like thunder. My throat tightened. I stepped up to the microphone, the lights warm against my skin, the faces below a blur of color and emotion. When I started EchoLens, I said, I was just trying to be heard. I didn't realize the real power wasn't in speaking. It was in staying long enough to listen to what the world needed. Every story we've shared came from someone brave enough to be honest. That's all this ever was, a collection of honesty. I looked toward the crowd, my eyes finding Mom and Dad near the front table. They were holding hands, smiling through tears. Chloe sat beside them, nodding quietly, her face lit with something that looked like peace. There was a time, I continued, when I thought revenge meant proving people wrong. But now I know it's proving yourself right over and over until the laughter fades into admiration and the doubt becomes your momentum. If you've ever been dismissed, mocked, or underestimated, know this: they can laugh, but they can't stop what's already growing. The room stood still. I felt the words settle into the air like breath. After the speech, people came up one by one: viewers, collaborators, strangers turned friends. Some cried, some hugged me, some just said, "Thank you." Each one carried a piece of the journey that had started in that cramped apartment. Later, I slipped away from the noise and stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched below in a sea of twinkling lights, the December wind cool against my skin. Ben found me there holding 2 glasses of champagne. Running away again, he teased. Just catching my breath, I said. He handed me a glass. 10 years ago, if someone had told me this all started because of one awful Thanksgiving dinner, I'd have laughed. I smiled. I would have too. He raised his glass. To silence. To stubbornness. To the stupid YouTube channel that changed everything. I laughed, clinking my glass against his. To the stupid channel. We stood there for a moment, quiet, watching the lights flicker in the distance. It felt surreal, like looking at a past version of myself from a place she'd never believed she'd reach. Inside, the celebration continued. Maya was on stage again, introducing the recipients of the first Hayes Initiative scholarships, 5 young storytellers from different countries each, with their own story of struggle and persistence. When their videos played, the room erupted in applause. I felt something swell in my chest, warm and steady. This was legacy. Not the kind written on awards, but the kind carried in other people's voices. After the gala ended, I walked my parents to their car. Mom hugged me tight. I watched your speech, she said softly. You sounded like your father. I smiled. I finally understand what he meant, Mom. Energy belongs to those who dare. She brushed a tear from her cheek. And you dared. When they drove away, I stood in the parking lot for a while, watching the headlights disappear into the night. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint echo of laughter and music from inside. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Back in my office, I found a letter waiting on my desk. No address, just a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Dear Emily, it read, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but your videos helped me leave an abusive marriage. You said silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Those words saved me. Thank you. I read it twice, then set it gently beside my father's old notebook. Some victories don't make noise. They just change lives quietly. A week later, EchoLens reached 20 million subscribers. The team wanted to throw another party, but I declined. Instead, I filmed one last video for the year, a simple one. No studio lights, no crew, just me, sitting by the window as snow began to fall outside. When I first started this channel, I said, I thought I was building an audience. Turns out I was building a family. Thank you for listening, for believing, for staying. Wherever you are, whatever you're dreaming of, don't stop. Let them laugh, let them doubt. Just keep going quietly until your truth is too big to ignore. I paused, smiling into the lens. And if this story meant something to you, tell me yours. I want to hear it. Because maybe your silence is the next sound that changes the world. I ended the recording, sat for a long time, then whispered to the empty room. That's enough. The next morning I woke to sunlight streaming across the floor. My phone buzzed endlessly, comments, messages. Congratulations, but I didn't rush to check them. I poured coffee, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked over the waking city. The sky was pale gold, the streets below alive with motion. Somewhere, someone was starting their first video, their first idea, their first dare. I raised my mug slightly, like a toast to them all, and whispered, "It's your turn now." The wind carried the words away, soft and sure. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else to listen, because the silence finally was mine. If you've ever been told your dream was foolish, or that your voice didn't matter, tell me your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Like, share, subscribe, and never forget. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.